Welcome into another episode of the Fat Guy Podcast. I'm the Fat Guy. Most people just call me Brett. Thank you so much for listening today. Today, I'm going to be talking about a very simple but seemingly unheard of, unknown, incomprehensible concept of not adding but subtracting. We are a add to society for health, weight loss, fitness. Everybody's wanting you to add this, add that. Add. It's not gotten anybody anywhere. The secret is to subtract. And while that is starting to gain some ground and momentum, it's still, especially seems to me in the medical profession, and then of course, obviously in some other areas we'll talk about, something that's unheard of. I want to quickly tell you that, yes, there is a very short segment of commercials at the beginning of these and at the end that helps me with podcast hosting cost. Been doing this podcast for a very long time. Foot the bill for all the podcast hosting and equipment that's used myself. Only recently have I tried to recoup some of that. Had a few people that love the podcast give me kickback on they don't like listening to ads, even though they're like 30 seconds. Like, I understand ads are annoying, but I do my best. You just don't know how much time I donate to helping people, and I will. And this podcast is only one arm of that. But this costs money, and so we started something recently, which has been helping me, thanks to some very, very generous people, helping me offset the cost of podcasting, and those would be patrons. So I just want to present this to you before we get into the podcast. If you would like to get a special, secret only patron supporter podcast feed that doesn't have any of this crap right here in it that I'm talking about, doesn't have any commercials, you also get it 2 to 3 days earlier than the general public, and other perks that you can find out about on my Patreon page. Consider that, especially if the commercials annoy you, especially if what you think we do is valuable, because for literally just a few bucks, you can help me handle the cost of podcasting. And it's a really cool way to tell me you appreciate what I do as well. It means the world to me. So if you'd like to do that, you can head to a URL I set up that points to my Patreon page. It's easy to remember. It's losewithmason.com. Losewithmason.com. If you'll go there, you can read the perks and be a patron supporter. And it would mean the world to me. You'll get the podcast 2 to 3 days earlier. There will be no ads. We cut all this fluff stuff in the beginning out. You jump to the head of the line if you need to ask questions or you need help. So I try to really let you guys know that I appreciate what you do. Again, that URL is losewithmason.com. Thanks so much for listening to today's episode of the Fat Guy Podcast. A quick shout out to our patrons, Angie Richardson, who is the newest, Hannah DeMello, Eric Barnhart, Cindy Carr, Bessie Williams, Kenneth Wilkerson, Bobby Houston. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for what you do. And I want to take a really quick second and give a shout out to the newest review on the podcast. So in addition to considering being a patron, in addition to sharing our podcast on your social media feeds, one of the best ways you can help the podcast is to give us a review on Apple Podcast. And I got to give a shout out to John G., who gave us a review actually on Valentine's Day. How sweet is that? And John G. wrote a review on Apple Podcasts, gave us 5 stars. I've been intermittent fasting for a few weeks now, and this podcast has helped me get my strategy right for maximum weight loss. I hope by the end of the year we can both meet our goals. Thank you so much, John G. Absolutely. And hey, if I can help you in any way, let me know, and let's conquer those goals together, shall we? All right. Follow us on social media if you haven't already. Fat Guy Podcast is a username. That's Facebook, that's Instagram, that's Twitter. Fat Guy Podcast. And share it. Share. I was thinking about this the other day when somebody I like a lot really suggested that I take a supplement to help me with an issue. And it was an inflammation supplement. And I had all these flashbacks to several years ago when, this has probably been, 6 to 10 years ago, when I was really starting to get into the upper 300s and get into the 400s, and I was experiencing more pain and more inflammation and more issues, I started trying all these different things that to help. And some of them did help to some degree, and some of them helped temporarily before they stopped helping, and other type things. And these were like supplement type things. But there's a whole array of things that fall into this category, whether it be supplements, whether it be drinks, elixirs, concoctions, all these things people tell you can add or start doing that'll help. And it really is a flawed methodology for improving your health, when the actual answer is you need to take stuff away. The primary thing being sugar. Sugar is the greatest. Sugar and hyperinsulinemia, which is chronically elevated insulin levels to deal with your chronically elevated blood sugars from all the crap that you eat. And when I say you, obviously I mean you and I and all of us in the same boat together. That is such a cause of inflammation. And when you go through, when you go through a lot of things, but when you go through things I went through recently, like last year when I had the incident and the scare with the DVTs and the pulmonary embolism and all that stuff, and I tried to do quite a bit of fasting in the beginning when I could, because of the effects of autophagy, because I thought that would speed up the reabsorption of the blood clot, because autophagy is a scavenger of protein, etc., and it reuses it and recycles it and does some waste things as well. But then I would screw up from time to time and eat something with a lot of carbs or whatever, and it would be almost instant. What would be instant? It only takes a few hours. And the inflammation comes back, the painful joints come back, and all these debilitating things come back. And, I broke my foot last May, which is what wound up triggering the blood clots, which triggered the DVTs, which obviously triggered the pulmonary embolism, thanks to some, insert sarcasm here, outstanding foot doctors I had the misfortune of seeing. Not one, but two. Even the second opinion. Oh, your foot is fine, but I won't get into that. But that first metatarsal, which is the bone from the big toe that goes up the top of the arch of the big foot, that arch of the foot, that's the one I broke. And even now, if I eat right and I do fasting, whether it be 16-8 or 24 OMAD, or every other day fasting or whatever, as long as I'm doing some kind of form of fasting, and then when I do eat, if I keep the carbs low, etc., like I have almost zero pain now in that foot. Occasionally I can feel a slight twinge there, but it feels pretty good. But now I can screw up like I did not too many days ago, actually. And, look, I'm not perfect. And I was in a situation, in a location, and I wound up eating chicken fingers and fries. Literally, 6 hours later, that foot was hurting. The inflammation had started. Then it moved to my knees. I started having painful knees. Then I started having the painful lower back. And it's just amazing how fast that takes over. So going back to the old days, if you talk to your friends about it, or even if you talk to your medical doctor, or you just talk to people in general, there's a wide array of people that will begin telling you things you should add to your diet to fix it. Oh, you need to take more micronutrients in. You need to get juices in. You need to get apple cider vinegar you need to do, or you need to take this concoction, or you need to take, I was at a poker table a couple of weeks ago, and somebody was telling this guy how the cure to all of his ills was tart cherry juice, which tart cherry has been shown to do a lot of things, but it's adding to, and so it's kind of like when you add something to, it's kind of like when you're stoking a fire with fuel and oxygen, but then you're also trying to dribble some water on it at the same time to cool it down. Like the easiest way to control the fire would just be to remove the fuel and oxygen. Now, you can have some effect if you keep the fuel and oxygen there, and you're dripping water over it. That you can dampen it down a little or make it a little smaller or whatever. And so there would be some benefit. But the easier way to control that would be just remove the fuel and oxygen from the situation, and the fire will go away. And that's a pretty good analogy, I think, to what's happening when we see these recommendations to add all these things. Now, I mentioned apple cider vinegar before, and that's by no way an indictment on apple cider vinegar. I think it's one of the best things you can do. If you can do a tablespoon in the morning, a tablespoon at night, or even better, a tablespoon before each meal, if you're eating 3 meals a day. If you're eating 2 meals a day, do it before each meal. If you're eating 1 meal a day, do it before your 1 meal, and then do another tablespoon before you go to sleep. It will greatly enhance your body's ability to deal with the blood sugars. And it does some other things too. But that's added therapy to the reduction. You should already be doing the reduction. You should be reducing the amount, or increasing rather, the amount of time between your meals. But that's actually a reduction. So it's, intermittent fasting or time restricted eating, depending on how long you go. And then restricting sugars from the diet. So you're taking away the sugars. You're taking away a meal, or you're taking away 2 meals, and you're expanding time between when you're eating. That's the number one therapy. And then the apple cider vinegar is just the icing on the cake. You're going to get a lot more accomplished. Like you just don't even take the apple cider vinegar. If you just remove the sugar and you put more time between meals, you're going to get a huge therapeutic effect without even bothering with apple cider vinegar. On the other hand, if you just continue eating and doing the same way you're doing and add apple cider vinegar to, in other words, you're adding to, not taking away, you're just going to get a very, very minor, nearly insignificant effect. And then obviously the best case scenario is to do both. You do the subtraction and then you do the addition of the apple cider vinegar. That's the most powerful. It's kind of like when people ask me about intermittent fasting or time restricted eating or keto or whatever. I tell them the most powerful is to do both. Take the carbs and sugars away and do the time restricted eating. Do them both in a 1-2 punch. And then if you can add to that on top of that apple cider vinegar, well, then you're really, you're doing about all you can do. So what's the point of this? Well, the point of this is you see this marketed all the time. You'll see these products pop up in commercials. You'll see either your friends post it on Facebook, or you'll see it pop up in an ad on Facebook, and it's this product. If you'll take this product, it'll help with this. Well, most of all our diseases and ailments and pathology stems from the same thing if you live in a Western society with the Western diet. It's the diet. The diet is the problem. Adding something to it is not the cure. Taking away is the cure. The taking away of the sugar, the taking away of the carbohydrates, processed carbohydrates. If you're really obese, nearly all the carbohydrates. Just take the minimum amount that you can possibly survive on, 0 preferably. But if you can only function on 5 or 10, or you need to get 15 or 20, whatever. Don't go over 20 though, if you're obese. If you're somebody who's not obese, you're not needing to lose a ton of weight, you may can get by with 40 carbs a day or 50 carbs a day. So you're eating a more low carb diet. But still don't make it processed carbs. Make it come from real carbs. Maybe that means you can work in a baked potato once a day or every other day. Maybe that means you can have some carrots and stuff that somebody who's really obese can't. But you're still not eating the processed carbs. You're still not eating the sugar. You're not eating bread. You're not eating the pasta. That stuff you just never need to eat. Nobody should ever eat that. It's Franken food. It's an invention. It's horrible. It comes from the most highly processed, damaging stuff ever that you can put in your body. So it's the taking away. It's not the adding to. So if somebody tells you, look, if you have a B12 deficiency, in the short term, obviously, you can take a B12 shot or a B12 pill. That's an adding to, and that will correct it. To me, that's a little bit different when you have a deficiency. That being said, the best way to fix that deficiency is to eat stuff with B12. Primarily meat. People who eat meat generally don't have B12 deficiencies, but it's possible you do. Everybody has different issues. Like me, Last time I went to the doctor, I had a huge deficit in vitamin D, which concerns me a lot because there's a very high correlation between cancer and other very serious pathologies with low levels of serum vitamin D. And so I've been trying to eat the right foods to make sure that I get the vitamin D. Of course, being in the sun a certain amount of time in the day is important. That's harder to do in the winter because of the angle and distance of the sun. But especially if you are anywhere north of a line horizontally, say from Atlanta northward. But even here in South Alabama, it's not optimum. And so, I mean, I've been trying to take a high quality D3 supplement, and I've added some K2 in there, and we're doing the, some other things as well. But so I'm not saying that there's never a case where adding something to isn't beneficial and therapeutic. I'm saying in general, when you're dealing with these issues like obesity, type 2 diabetes, or insulin resistance, and achy joints, and puffiness and swelliness and inflammation, and just all these general things that come as a result of eating the way we eat, the taking away is the number one most important thing to do before you even consider adding anything to. So I hope that makes sense, and I hope it helps you in some way. I'll end just briefly with the podcast with the basic general prescription that I try to subscribe to, and I do change it up from time to time and experiments in different ways, but it all boils down to the same thing, and that's putting as much time as possible between meals, eating fewer meals, and eating meals that don't have processed carbohydrates or sugars. I mean, that's really is the secret. This includes drinks, obviously. Sweetened colas and sweetened teas obviously fall in that category. It's all processed sugars. Breads and pastas and rices and potatoes and carrots, those type things. You got to steer away from them. But I'm not a doctor. You should consult with your doctor. I would just say if your doctor only tells you need to add something and he doesn't tell you to put time between your meals and remove the processed carbs from your diet, I would seriously consider finding another doctor. But that's just me. I'm not a doctor, and nothing I say should be considered as medical advice. Thank you so much for listening today. If I can help you in any way, thanks again to the patrons who are helping me foot the bill for the podcast hosting. You guys mean the world to me. And if I can help you in any way, let me know. I try to help everybody that I can. I appreciate you listening. The two biggest things you can do to help other people and me, but primarily other people, is share this episode on your social media and give me a review on Apple Podcasts.